My dad said it so casually that I almost believed it was just a fact of nature, not cruelty, not sabotage, just truth spoken aloud at the dinner table like salt being passed, and he didn't even look at me when he said it. He looked at my brother instead, proud and certain, and declared, "You don't have what it takes. Your brother is the real lawyer," and the words settled into my chest the way insults do when they come from someone whose approval you were trained to chase, and I sat there with my fork suspended midair, feeling heat crawl up my neck, while my mother stayed quiet the way she always did when my father decided someone needed to be cut down to size, and my brother smiled politely, pretending discomfort while soaking up the spotlight like it was owed, and that night wasn't the first time, it was just the clearest, because my father had spent years treating my ambition like a cute hobby while treating my brother's mediocrity like destiny, and when I graduated law school, he didn't come, he didn't call, he didn't even send flowers. He told relatives he was too busy, but he posted my brother's promotion dinner on social media the same week with captions about legacy and pride, and I learned early that in my family love was distributed like an inheritance, uneven and conditional. And I was always the one expected to smile anyway, expected to understand, expected to stay small so someone else could feel tall. I didn't become a lawyer to prove him wrong, not at first. I became one because I loved the precision of it, the way words could be structured into protection, the way truth could be documented and defended. But over time my father's dismissal became a quiet engine inside me, not anger, something steadier, a promise that I would build a life that didn't require his permission, and I did it silently. Because people like my father only notice success when it interrupts their narrative, so I let him keep his narrative while I built mine in the background, long hours, relentless discipline, a firm that grew faster than anyone expected because I wasn't chasing applause, I was chasing competence, and competence compounds. Years passed like that, me rising without announcement, my father still speaking about my brother as if he were the family's legal future, and then one Thursday afternoon, a thick folder landed on my desk with a cover letter clipped neatly to the front. And when I saw the letterhead, my stomach tightened with a strange familiarity, because it was my father's firm, the same struggling practice he had poured his ego into for decades, the same firm he insisted was respected, even as everyone in the industry knew it was bleeding clients, and the subject line was simple: partnership proposal and request for strategic counsel, and I stared at it for a long moment, the irony almost weightless, because my father didn't know where I worked now, not really. He knew the name of my company in the vague way people know the weather. He never asked details, never cared enough to learn, and yet here it was, his firm asking mine for help, asking for partnership, for resources, for survival, and he had no idea that the managing partner who would review the proposal was the daughter he told didn't have what it takes. My assistant knocked softly and entered with a tablet in hand, her voice professional. "They've requested an urgent meeting tomorrow morning," she said. "They claim it's time-sensitive," and I nodded slowly, feeling something shift inside me, not joy, not vengeance, but inevitability, because life has a way of circling back to the people who speak carelessly, bringing their words home like unopened mail, and I opened the folder. Inside were financials that didn't look like strength, they looked like desperation, declining revenue, pending litigation threats, a major client on the verge of leaving, and at the bottom, a request for capital support and reputation shielding through association with my firm. They weren't applying because they wanted partnership. They were applying because they needed a lifeline, and my father had swallowed enough pride to reach for it. I leaned back in my chair, the office around me quiet and immaculate, glass walls, soft lighting, the kind of place my father would have called corporate nonsense until he needed it, and my mind flicked through memories like snapshots, his voice at dinner. Your brother is the real lawyer, his absence at my graduation, his smirk when relatives asked about my career and he'd say, she's trying, and now, tomorrow, he would walk into this building expecting some faceless executive to save him, never imagining the face behind the desk would be mine. My phone buzzed with a text from my brother, casual, entitled, "Dad has a big meeting tomorrow. Don't make it about you." I stared at the message, feeling the familiar attempt to shrink me before I even spoke, and I didn't reply, because tomorrow wasn't about making anything about me. Tomorrow was about reality arriving. That night I didn't sleep much, not from nerves, but from the strange weight of knowing that the moment I had spent years avoiding was finally unavoidable, the moment my father's narrative would collide with the truth, and I wasn't sure what would hurt more. Watching him realize I succeeded without him, or realizing he only cared now because he needed something. By morning, I was at my desk early, the partnership proposal open, a legal pad beside it with notes, not emotional notes, business notes, because revenge that lasts is never loud, it is lawful, it is clean, it is undeniable. And when my assistant came in again and said, "They're here," my pulse stayed steady. I stood, smoothed my blazer, and looked at my reflection in the glass for a brief second, not to admire, but to remind myself that I was not the girl at the dinner table anymore. I was the lawyer my father said I could never be. And now his firm was about to ask mine for mercy. I walked toward the conference room with calm steps, the hallway silent except for the soft echo of my heels, and behind the door, my father was waiting, unaware that the meeting he thought would save him was about to reveal exactly who he had underestimated. The conference room door opened with a soft click, and for one suspended second the world held its breath, because timing is everything in moments like this, the pause before recognition, the gap between expectation and reality, and my father stepped in first. Shoulders squared, suit pressed, jaw set with the stubborn confidence of a man who has never imagined himself needing help from anyone, especially not from someone he once dismissed, and behind him my brother followed with a folder under his arm, eyes scanning the room like he belonged there, like he wasn't just an accessory to my father's ego, and then my father's gaze landed on me. It wasn't dramatic at first, it was subtle, a flicker, the smallest tightening around his eyes, as if his brain refused to process the image, because in his mind I existed in a separate category, daughter, disappointment, background, not authority, not partner, not the person at the head of the table, and I watched the moment recognition bloomed like slow shock. He stopped. My brother stopped too, confusion crossing his face, because he hadn't known either, not really, not in a way that felt real, and my father's voice came out rough, uncertain in a way I had never heard. "What are you doing here?" I stood calmly, extending a hand the way professionals do, the way the world expects you to behave when emotions are screaming under your ribs. "Good morning," I said evenly. "I'm the managing partner overseeing this proposal." The silence that followed was heavy enough to feel physical. My father didn't take my hand at first. He stared at it as if it were a trap. My brother blinked rapidly, his mouth parting. "Managing partner," he repeated, like the phrase was in a foreign language, and I nodded once, yes. My father's face hardened quickly, the shock trying to convert itself into anger, because anger is more comfortable than humility. "That's not possible," he said. I kept my tone polite. "It is." He finally sat, stiffly, as if sitting acknowledged the reality of the room, and my brother lowered himself into the chair beside him, eyes darting between us, unsettled. For years, I had imagined this moment in fragments, not as revenge, but as inevitability, like gravity. I had wondered if he would apologize, if he would soften, if he would see me. But my father didn't soften. He recovered. He leaned back, crossing his arms, trying to reclaim control through posture. So, he said slowly, "This is where you've been hiding." Hiding. The word was almost funny. I tilted my head slightly, working. My brother swallowed. "Dad, you didn't say she." My father cut him off sharply, eyes still fixed on me. "Why didn't you tell us?" The question wasn't curiosity, it was accusation, as if my success was a betrayal of his narrative. I smiled faintly, not cruel, just honest. "You never asked." The room went quiet again. My father's jaw tightened, and for the first time I saw the crack in his certainty, because it was true, he never asked, because he never believed the answer would matter. I opened the proposal folder calmly, flipping to the first page. "You requested an urgent partnership review," I said. "Your firm's financials show significant strain." My father's eyes flashed, pride wounded. "We're fine." I slid the paper across the table with numbers highlighted. "Your revenue declined 27% year over year. Your largest client filed notice of termination. And you have pending exposure from the Henderson litigation." My brother's face went pale at the mention of Henderson, because that case was whispered about even in legal circles, the kind of case that could bankrupt a mid-size firm. My father's voice rose, defensive. "That's why we're here." The truth finally spoken. He needed help. My father leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice. "We need support, access, connections." Connections. He meant my firm's name, my firm's credibility, my firm's shield. And the irony sat between us like a third person. He had spent years telling me I wasn't real, and now he needed my reality. I kept my expression composed. "Our firm does not enter partnerships lightly," I said. "Especially when there are governance concerns." My father stiffened. "Concerns?" I glanced toward my brother briefly. "Your proposal lists your firm as stable, but omits several active liabilities." My brother's eyes widened. "Dad." My father's voice sharpened. "We didn't omit anything." I turned another page. "You also misrepresented controlling authority. You listed my brother as lead counsel on multiple files." My brother froze, startled. Dad, those aren't mine." My father's face tightened, because the lie wasn't for me, it was for the board, for optics, for leverage. I continued calmly. "If we partner, your liabilities become ours. So we require full transparency." My father leaned back again, his pride fighting his desperation. "Are you enjoying this?" he asked bitterly. And there it was, the assumption that my professionalism was revenge. I met his gaze steadily. "No," I said quietly. "I'm doing my job." My brother's voice cracked slightly. "Lily. Since when are you?" I cut him off gently. "Since you were busy being the real lawyer." The words landed softly, but they landed. My father flinched, a subtle recoil, because he heard his own cruelty reflected back. His voice dropped, harsh. "You're going to punish us." I exhaled slowly. "You're facing consequences of your own decisions," I corrected. "Partnership requires trust. Your firm applied to mine. That means my standards." The room felt too small for the history inside it. My father's hands clenched into fists, then loosened, as if he was forcing himself to stay composed. Then he tried something else, the oldest tactic. He softened his voice. "We're family." Family. The weapon word. I looked at him carefully. "Family is why I'm willing to have this meeting at all," I said. "But family is not a discount on accountability." My brother whispered, "Dad, maybe we should." My father snapped, "Enough." Then he turned back to me, voice low, almost pleading now. "If this partnership doesn't happen, we lose everything." Lose everything. It was the first honest sentence he'd spoken. And in that moment, I realized the meeting wasn't just about business. It was about power shifting, about my father standing at the edge of a truth he couldn't control. He thought my brother was the lawyer. He thought I was nothing. And now his entire firm was sitting in my conference room asking for help. I closed the folder gently. I will present my recommendation to the board this afternoon, I said. Until then, you will provide full disclosure documents. My father's eyes widened, panic flickering today. I nodded once, calm, yes. My brother looked like he might speak, but couldn't. My father stood abruptly, chair scraping. This is unbelievable, he muttered. I remained seated, steady. What's unbelievable, I said softly, is that you never believed in me until you needed me. His face hardened, then he turned toward the door, my brother following in stunned silence. Before leaving, my father paused, hand on the handle, and said without looking back, "Don't do this out of spite." I smiled faintly. "I'm not," I replied. "I'm doing it out of truth." And when the door closed behind them, the room felt quieter than it had any right to, because the loudest thing in it had always been my father's certainty, and now that certainty was cracking. My father didn't call that afternoon, not immediately, because men like him don't reach for humility until every other option is gone, and I knew he would spend hours pacing his office, barking orders, convincing himself he still had leverage, that this was a misunderstanding he could dominate, but the truth was already written in numbers, in omissions, in liabilities that didn't care about pride, and when the board convened at 4 o'clock, the decision wasn't emotional, it was structural. The boardroom upstairs was larger than my conference room. Glass walls, long polished table, partners seated with tablets open and eyes sharp, people who built their careers on risk assessment, not sentiment. And I stood at the front with my father's proposal displayed behind me, calm, composed, professional, because this wasn't revenge theater, it was due diligence. The senior chair spoke first. "This is the Carter and Hale request?" I nodded, yes. A partner on the left skimmed the documents. They're requesting capital support and brand shielding. "Correct," I replied. Another partner frowned. "Their litigation exposure is worse than reported." "It is," I said evenly. "They omitted active notices." Murmurs moved through the room. The chair's eyes narrowed, and they listed non-controlling counsel as lead on files. I didn't say my brother's name. I didn't need to. I simply answered yes. The chair leaned back, steepling his fingers, recommendation. I paused, not for drama, but for precision. "Conditional denial," I said. "We cannot partner under misrepresentation. However, I recommend an alternative." The partner's attention sharpened. "Alternative?" "A limited advisory assistance package," I continued, "with strict oversight and no equity entanglement. They receive guidance, not rescue. They face their liabilities directly." The chair nodded slowly, approving the firmness. "Agreed," another partner said. "Partnership would contaminate us." A vote followed, quick and decisive. Denied. Advisory only. No lifeline disguised as alliance. When it was done, the chair looked at me carefully. "You handled this cleanly," he said. Clean. That word mattered more than vindication. I walked back to my office with the decision in my hand and a quiet heaviness in my chest, because some part of me had once wanted my father to see me without needing something, but life rarely delivers recognition without cost. At 6:12 p.m., my phone rang. "Dad." I stared at the screen for a moment before answering, "Hello." His voice was tight, strained. "What did you tell them?" "The truth," I replied simply. He exhaled sharply, anger fighting panic. "They denied partnership." "Yes." Silence. Then, quieter, "We can't survive without it." There it was again. Need. I leaned back in my chair. "You applied because you need saving," I said calmly. "But you didn't come honestly." His voice cracked. "We did what we had to." I closed my eyes briefly, feeling the weight of that excuse. "That's what you taught me people say when they justify cutting corners," I said. He didn't respond. Then his tone shifted, softening, something unfamiliar threading through it. I didn't know you were. This. Not accomplished. Not capable. Just this. I opened my eyes. You didn't know because you didn't want to, I said quietly. His breath sounded uneven. I was hard on you, he muttered. Hard. Another minimization. I let the silence do the work. Then he said it, almost like it hurt. Your brother isn't ready. The admission landed sharper than any insult, because it was the first time my father acknowledged reality about the son he built his ego around. I know, I replied softly. He swallowed. I need you to help us. Help. Not order. Not demand. Ask. The word sat between us. And for a moment, I wondered what it would feel like to say no, to let the firm collapse, to let him taste the full consequence of years of dismissal. But revenge that destroys often leaves rubble in your own life too. So I spoke carefully. I arranged an advisory option, I said. No partnership. No rescue. Guidance only. You'll have to be transparent. His voice tensed. That's humiliating. I almost laughed. Humiliating. He cared about humiliation now. I answered calmly, it's accountability. Another pause. Then, in a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he asked, why didn't you tell me sooner? I stared out my office window at the city lights starting to bloom. Because every time I tried to be seen, I said softly, you looked at my brother. The line went quiet. When he spoke again, his voice was rough. I was wrong. Wrong. 2 words I thought I'd never hear. And strangely, they didn't feel like victory. They felt like grief. Grief for the years it took him to say it. Grief for the daughter who could have been supported instead of doubted. I exhaled slowly. Tomorrow, my team will send the advisory terms, I said. That's the help I'm offering. He whispered, thank you. The words sounded foreign in his mouth. I didn't respond with warmth or coldness. I responded with truth. Don't thank me, I said quietly. Learn from it. The call ended. The next morning, my father arrived at my office again, not with arrogance, but with paperwork, disclosures, signatures, the uncomfortable weight of honesty. He didn't meet my eyes at first. My brother stood behind him, silent, smaller. And as they sat across from me, my father cleared his throat. I told them you're the managing partner, he said stiffly. I blinked. He continued, voice tight at the firm. I told them, you were the real lawyer. The sentence hung in the air like a repaired fracture. Not perfect. Not erased. But acknowledged. I held his gaze. I've always been, I said softly. He flinched. And in that moment, I understood the final revenge wasn't watching him beg. It was watching him finally confront the truth he spent years denying. He didn't lose his firm that day. He lost his illusion. And I didn't gain his approval. I gained something far better. Freedom from needing it.